So what's going on, guys? This is the Ninja Movies back again with an all new video today. Today I'm going to be following up my top 5 favorite Pixar films, so definitely go check that video out if you haven't already. And today I'm going to be doing somewhat of a list video. I'm going to be ranking all of the Kevin Smith films that I've seen. Kevin Smith, if you're not aware of his work, it's beautiful. You know, he's a hit of the 90s. He's the man that really brought indie film to the mainstream, him and Quentin Tarantino. And he's been my favorite director for a long ass time. So I'm not going to be doing the video in the same style as I did the top 5 Pixar films, simply because I'm not going to list off the budget for his films or what it made and little things like that. I'm just going off the top of the dome. These are some of my favorite movies of all time. I'm going to rank them how I please. Let me know down below if you are a fan of Kevin Smith and how you'd rank his films. I'm just going to say straight off the bat, this is a list of 12 that I've ranked, and there's 2 films of Kevin Smith's that I have not seen yet. So if you're wondering where they're on the list, I haven't seen them. And the first one up is actually a short film, and that's Drawing Flies. I just have not got around to seeing it. It's a much more obscure film, and that's sort of the reasoning behind why I haven't seen it. And then the other film I haven't seen in his discography is Red State, which I know is a sin. I know the main actor in Red State went on to be the villain in Tusk, and you know, Kevin Smith fell in love with like the way that he acted, and I've just heard it's overall a really good and shocking movie from Kevin Smith. I know Quentin Tarantino rated about it, and Kevin Smith said that if you ever want to, you know, get your ego pumped up, just have Quentin Tarantino watch your movie High. But with that said, guys, I don't want to ramble too much. I just want to get into the films. If you haven't seen these films, check them out for yourselves. They're definitely worth a watch. So starting off, we're going to go with number 12, and that film is Cop Out. And simply, I just want to say it is a movie that Kevin Smith wasn't super proud of. I'm putting it so low on the list, yes, even lower than Yoga Hosers, simply because it doesn't feel like a Kevin Smith movie whatsoever. It wasn't written by him, and I think this is the only film he's ever directed where he didn't write it. And, you know, Kevin Smith himself has said so many times that he's much better at writing than he is directing. And, you know, even though I like his directing style, it is true. Like, his dialogue is what makes his movie so goddamn good. And this has just no flavor to it. It's a very poor movie. And obviously Kevin Smith had a lot of headbutts with Bruce Willis, and, you know, he's been public about it. I know that he apologized about it recently since Bruce Willis is now sick. But yeah, Cop Out, I've watched it maybe once or twice. It's a very forgettable film. Moving on to my number 11 spot, and that is the film Yoga Hosers. Now, this is pretty much Canadian Clerks. I know that Kevin Smith has this whole fascination with Canada and everything like that. And, you know, that's cool. And this movie is goddamn creative, but it's also just like, some movies don't need to be made. It's probably like how Tusk came about, and it was a podcast segment. And, you know, I appreciate that he's written a movie for his daughter, Harlequin Smith, but she just wasn't a great actress in this film, in my personal opinion. There was a lot of cool costume designs, like the Bratwursts, Nazis that Kevin Smith plays himself. All that sort of stuff is cool, but, you know, it doesn't make for an enjoyable movie. I've only watched Yoga Hosers like once, and yeah, I can definitely feel why Kevin Smith, after his heart attack, went back to his roots. And I do love that he said, I can't go out on Yoga Hosers, and I feel that. It's definitely deserving of number 11. Number 10 is going to Zack and Mary Make a Porno. Now, this is a fine comedy. It really is. But once again, in the same vein as Cop Out, it doesn't really feel like a Kevin Smith movie. It really feels like Kevin Smith was just trying to do Judd Apatow's whole recipe. And it's definitely was a big sort of jab in his career. I know that he was so disappointed with the outcome. It still made good money, but he thought this was going to be his first $100 million return. It was going to be his blockbuster, and it sort of flopped. I think the movie's enjoyable. It was the first Kevin Smith movie I watched because I watched it not knowing it was Kevin Smith. For the longest time growing up, I did think it was Judd Apatow. I enjoy the film. There's nothing wrong with it, and I'm a big fan of Seth Rogen and everything. But in terms of a Kevin Smith ranking, it's not Kevin Smith's greatest piece, and it doesn't feel that personal to me. Moving on to number 9, and that is Jersey Girl. Now, this is a fine movie, but once again, the lower ones on the list, I'm sort of putting in a vein of, they don't really feel like what I think Kevin Smith's best qualities are. And Jersey Girl's a fine movie, and I'm glad Ben Affleck was in it. This was once again Kevin trying to, you know, sort of escape the indie film route and break into the mainstream. And this movie didn't do well whatsoever. It sort of plays Kevin's career like that. Anytime, you know, he starts getting it, you know, a bit bigger of a budget, then he has to get sent all the way back to the start. I know this also had downfall because, you know, it had Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, and, you know, when their relationship sort of fell into turmoil or whatever, it sort of affected the film as well. It's a touching father and daughter story. It's a fine movie. I would watch it, and I have watched it a couple times, but it's just, you know, it's not overly funny. It's a bit more of a drama, and, you know, it's just okay. Moving on to number 8, a movie that I've watched several times, and you might be surprised seeing it so low on the list. I feel like this is either a love it or hate it film, and that is Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Two of my favorite characters of all time, Jay and Silent Bob, are what makes, you know, Kevin Smith's whole universe a thing. And, you know, this is a fine movie. This is all about them. I just think the comedy nowadays is a bit weak. I don't find myself overly laughing, and I don't know whether it was Kevin's fault or what it is, but this is like one of the movies that I think Will Ferrell is so dry and not funny, and that is such a rarity for me. But, you know, the costume designs, all the references, I mean, it's a great movie, and if you're watching like his universe start to finish, you gotta watch it, and it's a good film, but it's so low on my list just because I don't think the comedy has aged that well. I don't think this is his most well-written or funniest film. It's more of a spectacle and more of a bit of like a stoner comedy like Cheech and Chong and things like that, or Harold and Kumar. It's just an easy adventure film to get into. Coming in at number 7 is the film Clerks 3. Now, what a trilogy that we didn't think that we were ever going to have. It pretty much does Kevin Smith's whole life story. Like, it really shows how he made the first Clerks film. It's a movie about making a movie. It also shows a similar heart attack to what he had in real life. I think it's very well written. I love the Clerks universe. Like, Randall is one of my favorite characters of all time. And it was a great closer, and it actually had me teary. Like, honestly, I was so happy when it came out. I was so happy that we could get another Clerks film. It is the weakest of the 3 for me, but it's also just a fantastic movie at the same time. Like, I have no real complaints other than, you know, if you haven't seen the other Clerks films, I don't know why you would start with 3, but it's not going to make much sense to you at all. And it's also, yeah, it's just not the best Clerks has to offer, but it is a good end chapter. Coming in at number 6, this might surprise a lot of people, but Tusk. And honestly, I have to say, hands down, this is the best directed film Kevin Smith ever made. So in comparison to Yoga Hosers, you know, Tusk shouldn't work, but I have showed so many people the film Tusk that don't know anything about Kevin Smith, and they think it is the coolest, most, you know, different film they've ever seen. It's got gore, it's horror, but honestly, the cinematography, for no goddamn reason, is breathtaking, and I love Justin Long in all Kevin Smith's, you know, later films, and I just love Justin Long as an actor anyway. Very underrated in my opinion. Yeah, I've watched Tusk like 10 plus times, and that's crazy to me. It never gets old. It's a really good horror comedy. I like the whole backstory to why he's obsessed with walruses and all these sort of things. The special effects are good. It was just the most high out of your brain idea, and it worked in my personal opinion. I mean, I'm putting it above Clerks 3, you know, a main staple in, you know, Kevin Smith's series. So I think if you haven't seen Tusk, you've got to give it a go, man. It's one of the most interesting films you could ever watch. Alright, so now we're on to the top 5, and this is where I was like, I don't even know where to place these. Everything in the top 5 here are like some of my favorite movies of all time, but I'm going to go with Dogma at number 5. A fantastic movie. It's only so low for me in the top 5 simply because I haven't watched it as many times as I would like. It is barely ever on streaming services. It's a out-of-print DVD and Blu-ray. I have owned it in the past, gotten rid of it with, you know, the rest of my collection. It's a long story. I just haven't watched it as many times as I would like, but this is Jason Mewes' like hands down his best performance as Jay. He stole the show. This pretty much out of all the indie type, you know, universe films that Kevin Smith has done, this did the best at the box office. I mean, it has Matt Damon, it has Ben Affleck, it has Chris Rock. It is a fantastic movie, and from start to finish, I loved everything about it. It was such a good continuation after Chasing Amy, you know, obviously not sharing the same characters, but a lot of the same actors. Just a fantastic movie, and it's sort of like in a way, like a prequel to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Like, Jay and Silent Bob become the main characters in this movie, and, you know, for their first outing, really, as the main characters, they killed it. This is one of the best movies that Kevin Smith has ever done, and I would just like to watch it over a couple more times. before I bump it up the list. So moving on to number 4, another potentially controversial opinion, but I'm putting Clerks 2 here. I think Clerks 2 is so goddamn funny. I've watched it nearly more than the first film, which is kind of crazy. I feel like it's an easier film to ease people in. Some people are deterred by the black and white and yeah, yada yada yada. I just think Clerks 2 is a great follow-up. It's a higher budget, and that's usually what kills it for some people. Some people are so die-hard of the first Clerks that they hate Clerks 2 because it went Hollywood or some shit like that. Get over it, man. I mean, it started up movies, which literally Kevin Smith became a pop-out restaurant in America. Kevin Smith really just runs with all these ideas and makes money off it. Like, he really sells himself better than any director I know. But honestly, Clerks 2 is super funny. The scene towards the end where Randall is sort of like really giving his spiel, giving it to Dante, is one of the best acted scenes as well. Like, I know that Randall was a first-off actor in the original Clerks film, but I would like to see him in other roles. This dude can act so goddamn good. So can Dante, so can the whole, crew. Like, honestly, these movies immerse you so much, and Clerks 2 is one of the best sequels to any sort of comedy series I've seen. So now we're on to the heavy hitters. We got top 3, baby. These, on a good day, could go in any sort of order, but number 3, I'm going with Mallrats. Mallrats was the infamous bomb that came after Clerks, but then found its cult success on home video. There's no movie that has the aura around it like Mallrats to me. I feel like Kevin Smith really was it's his first time on a big budget. He was really putting his foot down, because I know that, once they went off the indie scene, they wanted to recast Jay. They wanted to, really change his vision, and he's like, this is exactly how I want it. It introduced us to Jason Lee, who is one of my favorite actors of all time, and one of my favorite performances is Jason Lee in all of these Kevin Smith movies he's in. I think he nails it. It's got an introduction to Ben Affleck into the series. It's got so many introductions. I think it's a beautiful plot, and once again, Jay and Silent Bob steal the show in this film. If it wasn't for Jason Lee, Jay and Silent Bob would have just ran this whole movie. I think it's a fantastic movie. It really encapsulates the 90s like no other film I've ever watched. It's one of my favorites of all time, and you have to check out Mallrats if you haven't already. So we're down to the top 2, guys. My number 2 is the film Clerks. And Clerks, without a doubt, started this whole thing. It's one of the most unique films. It's made by somebody who loves films. And this is where I would say, as an example, Kevin Smith shines the most in his dialogue. Like, honestly, it is a wordy-ass movie. It's so witty, it's so quick, and it sort of shows with Kevin's comment where he says, I'm more of a writer than a director. This is just a basic, day in the life of somebody that works at the Quick Stop. It's all in black and white. It's super low budget. It still holds up with its comedy. It's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Randall in this movie is, without a doubt, one of my favorite on-screen characters of all time. I honestly love Clerks, and if you haven't seen it, like, I remember seeing people recommend it on DVD updates, like something like 10, 15 years ago, and I'm like, what is this movie Clerks? I've never heard of it. The day that I watched it, I just fell in love with Kevin Smith's work, and it's never changed since that day. And coming in at my number 1, I have to say, without a doubt, and everyone who knows me knows this is going to be number 1, and that is the film Chasing Amy. After the bomb of Mallrats, Chasing Amy got put out on a much lower budget. It did so goddamn well. It is the most emotional film that Kevin Smith has ever done. And I'm not, it's about a lesbian, and there's critiques where people are shitting on Kevin Smith because obviously he's not a woman. How are you writing a tale about a lesbian? But it is honestly so goddamn good. The performances, Jason Lee, this is my favorite Jason Lee performance ever. He's so fucking good in this movie. Ben Affleck is fantastic. Everyone in this film is so fantastic. It's so quotable. Watching the behind the scenes of how this movie got made, like the little prop Comic-Con at the start, and then, producers had to come in as actors because they didn't have anyone. Like, this movie took a lot of effort, and it's proof in the pudding that this is, like, without a doubt the best thing that Kevin Smith has ever made. He's also mentioned that people always are like, oh, why can't you make another movie like Chasing Amy? Because he can't anymore, because this was his real life, sort of view on the world at that time. This is all the sort of heartache and sort of worries that he had moving into the future. Like, he pretty much said all these insecurities are in this film, and I think that's why the writing is so goddamn beautiful. It feels so real, plus the performances. honestly, hands down, this is one of my favorite films of all time, and it is definitely my #1 Kevin Smith film. So once again, apologies for Drawing Flies and Red State not being on the list. How did you like the rankings? Are you a fan of Kevin Smith as well? Let me know down below. And I guess leave it a like, add it to your favorites, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.